Hello all. So I'm here to talk about self-soothing skills with you today, and I'm going to point you to distress tolerance handout number 8 so we can go ahead and get started. Self-soothing 101. So what is it? It can be a comforting or nurturing or peacemaking, gentle practice that is really focused on being mindfully kind to oneself. And in practice, in theory, that's what it is. In practice, it's doing things or activities that feel pleasant and comforting. And why do we do that? Because it provides relief from stress or pain. It's to make difficult times much easier to get through, or makes it easier to pass the time. And at times, well, if nothing else, it's not making anything worse and can make things better. It also reduces vulnerability to emotion mind and helps us to take a step back so as to not act on urges or act impulsively, and can also help with feelings of missing out on something or feelings of feeling deprived or invalidated that can then come before we get to a place of increasing vulnerability. It really is something that is meant to help us tolerate pain and distress without making things worse. So let me move to the next slide with y'all. When do we use it? When I'm moving all around here, moving around the world so you can see some of this text. Use it when we're in emotion mind, anytime that we're feeling in pain, physical pain at times as well, or when we're feeling anxious or distressed. Use when it's difficult to go immediately to problem solving. So this can be considered an emotion coping skill or emotion focused coping skill rather than a problem focused skill, and is particularly helpful when we know that there isn't a solution to the immediate problem that we're going to. Self-soothing is something that helps in times of grief or in times of high distress, and especially during these times of public health concerns where there might not be something actionable that we can completely solve in the moment. Using self-soothing can be a helpful way to bring down that distress. And some make this a regular practice of self-care overall. So now I'm going to point us to this worksheet, handout 8. And what we see on it is a bunch of different domains. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment here. You can pause the video and look through this sheet. The domains are split up by our 5 senses, really. So in some ways, it also leverages grounding. But within each domain, I'm going to ask you to check off those things that resonate more with you, that you could see yourself doing more so than other things. So check those that you think might work for you. I'm going to take a moment, pause. Then as you come back, we'll review these together when we are all on our call together. I'm wondering, are there any that work better than others for you? And if so, why might that be? So within each of these, after you've checked off the boxes, if you feel so led, you can also rank them for yourself. Within the vision domain, going people watching, going to a museum, that would be number 1 for me, going to a museum. How practical is that right now? They're virtual museum tours. If you want to write notes to yourself as to how you might do that, or what it might look like in your life right now, also helpful, I think. Moving on, moving myself again. Sorry. Thanks for your patience. What gets in the way of self-soothing? I'm going to ask you to jot down a few things that might get in the way for you. All of us can have difficulties with self-soothing at different times. I think that at times of high distress, or in general, we can believe that some people believe that they don't deserve soothing or kindness or gentleness, and they may feel guilty or ashamed when when engaging in self-soothing. If this is you and you feel like you sometimes feel this guilt by doing these self-care activities, I urge you to think about that right now and see how much you fit within that, or if that's a time when it's happening more for you than other times, what else happens at that time that'll give us clues, like I'm less likely to use self-soothing in this circumstance when I'm with my family and I feel like I'll be judged or what have you. Other people sometimes believe that they should be getting this soothing from others. Like, it's not my job to soothe. Why isn't my partner engaging in some of this soothing or pleasurable activities with me? They don't self-soothe maybe as a matter of principle, or maybe they feel angry at others when they attempt to self-soothe. Sometimes we can be judgmental, and I think I myself have caught myself judging others in my family when I'm like, okay, well, now doesn't really seem like the time to be really taking care of yourself. There's so many other things going on, and let's focus on that first, or what have you. And in the same way, I think we can judge ourselves. Whatever those factors are that get in the way for you, and you've noticed, like, these are the situations or contexts or people around whom or emotions in which I'd be less likely to do this, or I'd be more likely to judge myself, or I would be more likely to think that I'm not deserving of it, write down. And then I think that's when we make use of a behavior and strategy that called opposite action. That's when, even when we're having these feelings that can act as barriers to engaging in this skill, you do exactly the opposite and just start engaging in it in order to get there first. Because once you start the task, once you start hopefully the pleasurable activity, less of a task, then that can also decrease the anxiety, stress, and emotion. The biggest barrier or hurdle is getting over that point to start the task. So encourage you to use opposite action when feeling those ways, and point you to Emotion Regulation Handout 10 for reference. So here we are talking about self-soothing. Can we overuse self-soothing? Well, turns out that we can. And ways that we might do that is if that's our go-to and we're using it in excess or in a way that precludes us or stops us from using other problem-solving skills or other skills that can help us move through the distress. So if it leads to avoidance, or if it's been being used in a self-destructive way, then those are signals to us. Each of the activities on Handout 8 can create problems, just like with anything in life, if it's done too much or in replacement of engaging in problem solving. Just going to ask you to bookmark or take note of any times when you think that this might be happening for you. Are there activities that are self-soothing that you feel like you go to or use in a way that might not be as helpful? To counter that, we say to balance soothing the senses with problem solving. So self-soothing can be an effective first step because it brings down our distress levels and gives us some clarity in thinking. As our arousal levels increase, everyone's ability to concentrate or to be able to focus and engage in more of the higher level cognitive strategies that we know of gets harder. So step one in bringing that down can be helpful. This is not a problem-solving skill, so it's not alone, cannot be used to resolve crises. But again, when we're engaging in emotion-focused coping, it can be helpful if there's not necessarily a problem that needs to be solved or a crisis that's your role to work in solving. And on the other hand, it can be used with other skills. Like, for instance, some people will use the tip skill first and then problem solving, and then as a reward afterward to use a self-soothing activity or task. So this distress tolerance handout 8A goes through a self-soothing activity called body scan meditation. I'm going to ask that you read through this and maybe even try it on your own. And we will try this together as our mindfulness practice at our next group meeting. Sometimes we can have judgments about using body scans as well. And I think the important thing to remember here is that it's important to gain awareness of our body, and that this isn't expected to like bring complete relaxation at the first time that it's used. It's something that we use over time in order to get its full or maximal benefits. And sometimes people can feel the sensation of like relaxation induced panic, like either from judging ourselves or feeling like, hey, you know what, I should be able to calm down, but I'm not. And I have some self judgment maybe around why that's the case, or I have some expectations around it. In those cases, we want to take a step back and to know that the goal is simply to raise awareness in what is going on in our body that can help us across all skills, not just this one. And practicing that non-judgmentally skill with ourselves can be helpful there. There's not a way to really do it wrong. And when you first start, we're starting small. It might not result in full-on relaxation. And you can stop at any time during the exercise as you are going through it. Yeah, so I just wanted to point those things out too. So in summary, some questions to think about so we can definitely share with one another. The beautiful part about group is that each of you know what works best for yourselves. And I learn too, so much from each of you. Each of us learn from one another. So what are other self-soothing activities that you use within these domains of the senses, vision, hearing, smell, taste, or touch? When have you been using these skills? What makes it hard to use them? And are there times or feelings or situations when it's easier to use these skills? I'm seeing a couple little typos here, so appreciate y'all letting that on by. So just one when there. And I'm gonna practice not judging myself. Yeah, so identifying any times or feelings or situations or even people that you're around that makes it easier to use the skill, and we can come back together and talk about how to make best use of this. Other pieces that I think about are what would I need on hand to do some of these things. If you're doing a virtual museum tour, you might need your phone or your computer, headphones. For some of the smell-based exercises, it suggests baking or using lemon or cinnamon, and so being at home and in the kitchen. For others, there are things that you would either need on hand or not need. So another dimension to think about. Thank you all for listening and for joining us for another quality production of some kind on these skills. And I look forward to seeing you all on Tuesday morning to talk more about this. Be well. Bye.